The North American model of wildlife conservation is the greatest conservation model in the world. It's a success story that should be shared and celebrated because everybody is a part of it. Welcome to Through the Gates to Save the Hunt. My name is Dan Gates. I'm the Executive Director for the Coloradans for Responsible Wildlife Management, and this is our first podcast episode that we're going to jump into the weeds and try to inform the general public about what we've done, where we're at, and where we intend on going over the course of the next 2 to 5, maybe 10 years, depending on where this takes us. Over the course of the last 14 months, you've heard us and seen us on all sorts of different social media trying to defeat Proposition 127, the attempt to ban the hunting of mountain lions and bobcats and lynx in the state of Colorado. The North American model of wildlife conservation is something worth propping up, and it's worth fighting for and defending along with science-based wildlife management, because without either one of those, we don't have what we have, and we won't have the ability to be able to continue to hunt, to be able to manage wildlife, and be able to pursue our history and tradition and heritage that is so important to sportsmen and women throughout the United States and Canada as well. Today we've got Sean Ender with Peak to Creek Films. Sean is our cinematographer, videographer, graphic designer, our social media guy, and that has produced a ton of our assets and collections, along with Lauren Schrag with Good Bull Outdoors. And we're gonna get into the weeds a little bit on why we're doing what we're doing, why we need to do what we need to do, and how we're going to try to convince people to listen about why it's important to try to figure out a way to engage, activate, motivate, maybe instigate, fund, and emulate the successes of what we were able to create on 127 that so many states, individuals, and organizations have reached out on. So welcome you, Sean. Appreciate everything you've done in the past. And our friendship's gone on for quite some time now, but we didn't know we were going to end up where we're at now.
Psyched to be where we're at right now, especially with what we faced, and obviously humbled to have been a part of it and work with you on something that meant a lot to a lot of people and meant a lot to wildlife. And, to be here and finally telling our story, the North American model story, that success. Man, when we first met, I'm not sure we ever saw ending up where we ended up, but no. We had met sitting on the side of a hill filming a pine marten research project, and it snowballed from there, and a pretty monumental effort that I think you've been involved in this landscape a long time, but dare I say that changed the landscape?
I think so. I think just kind of rewriting the playbook and trying to recreate a new roadmap. You open up a road atlas, which is foreign material to a lot of younger people, but you open up a road atlas, and there's about 97,000 ways to get somewhere within one state. And while we had to take multiple detours, we had to turn around and go different directions and back up and figure out where we were going to go and what we needed to do to rebuild. Our relationship, yours and I's, was created out of positive messaging that then became more informational and trying to institutionalize what we knew what was right. That then turned around and culminated with probably the biggest battle that most states have seen in the United States over the course of the last 20 or 25 years, based upon something that we're, as you're well aware of, people, when they heard what we were up against in September of 2023, they said, well, good luck. Looks like you're going to lose another one. Wish the best of luck to you. But we knew all along that based upon our victories that we had previously, that we had a chance. Maybe it was a slim chance, but we had a chance because we knew what we were doing as far as messaging. We just didn't know how much money we had to raise. We didn't know what we actually had to do to create an armament, a team, strategies, and get the funding that was necessary that inevitably we ended up getting from 50 different states and helped us fund the effort. And it helped in the messaging, it helped in the strategy, it helped in the legal fees, and the independent expenditure committees, and and the investigations and a ton of things that happened that the average person just didn't know that all the stuff that was going on to make it work. But you were so instrumental in being able to take the rat in my cage that was running around in circles and put it with your cage and the rat and create some stuff that made us look bigger, better, meaner, faster, stronger, because the message that was created, everybody could understand. They could understand, comprehend it, and it resonated with them because we were talking about science-based wildlife management, the North American model, and what it takes to sustain that in perpetuity.
Yeah, and I think it's, I've always been invested in the North American model, and I've had opportunities in other venues to tell that story in film work and whatnot. And so it's been kind of cool to get to learn that on a more intimate level and be with biologists when they're putting collars on elk and whatnot. And I've learned enough about it to be at the point where I'm like, I don't understand why this isn't normal education about the story of wildlife, because it's an incredible story, right? And so taking that and being able to explain really complex scientific ideas to a general public who I honestly think is, and I think we learned this, is very hungry for that truth, that story, how this stuff happens. And, I think we'll dive pretty deep into everything that went into 127, because it wasn't just one thing, but the media side of it was pretty cool to sit down and talk with landowners and ranchers, and obviously people in the sportsman community where their livelihood, their soul, and their who they are was under siege. But then also biologists and former biologists who have been a part of this story and wildlife on the landscape, giving those people a genuine, real voice to the masses that I don't think I've never seen something like that. I think we kind of sort of made it up as we went along, but we trusted what we were doing throughout. We learned things along the way. We learned how to do things and how to say things. But I think we started the message of we need to talk to the 80% of people in Colorado that don't hunt, but that have no problem with hunting. But what is the message that resonates with them? What's the story that resonates with them? And that story has always been science-based wildlife management, and how you explain that to people. Again, it's wildlife science is complex. I'm a dumb camera guy. I'm not a biologist, but I wrap my head around it, and people understand that hunting is necessary as a management tool. Balance on the landscape. If you take one thing away, it throws everything out. And maybe I don't think you should hunt mountain lions, but I also probably understand that if you stop doing that, it's going to impact deer and elk and people and the landscape as a whole. And telling the story that, hey, Colorado Parks and Wildlife has done a really good job. Did you know what they've done for the last 60 years? And we started telling that story, and that resonated with people. And we put out so much information that when people wanted to be an informed voter, they could do the research, and every hit that you had was stuff that we and people that we partnered with wrote, produced. The story was out there however you wanted to consume it.
If you've ever wanted to experience the outdoors, you need to experience Davis Tent. Davis Tent's been building the best quality canvas tents for over 50 years. Top quality materials, experience out in the field, and top quality customer service is what defines Davis Tent. From standard size tents to cowboy teepees and innovative designs, Davis Tent has you covered. When most hunters are ready for a canvas tent, they need guidance and advice. Call Davis Tent anytime for no stress, no pressure experience, learning more about canvas tents. One thing hunters enjoy about working with Davis Tent is the ease of buying a hunting package, a total hunting package, including a barrel stove and other essentials. Davis Tent makes world-class panniers using either the amazing iron cloth material or 1,000 denier cordura. The entire line of tack includes cowboy bedrolls, mantees, hobbles, last cinches, top packs, pommel bags, and more. Davis Tent has tons of gear for wall tent camping and hunting, and from the world-class big boy cot and sleeping pad to flies and floors, stove fans, solar lights, and a host of tent organizers, make sure you choose Davis Tent. For more information or to place your order, go to davistent.com. One thing that was really interesting is the fact that we continually relied on the experts, the data, the science, the studies, 60 years of information that was compiled through Colorado Parks and Wildlife, Colorado Division of Wildlife, Colorado Game and Fish on mountain lions. And as we told the story that we'll continually tell, that in 1965, mountain lions became a big game species, and they did so from hunters and houndsmen and concerned citizens to make them a big game animal so they weren't a nuisance species. Well, since 1965, when you had roughly 200 lions on the landscape, and now you've got 4,400 to 5,000, the lies and the fallacies that come from the opposition could be nothing further from the truth when they said, well, if we continue to hunt these in this manner, we continue to kill them at this rate, we're going to extirpate them. Well, we've been killing them at that rate. We've been hunting them at that manner. We've been managing them for 60 years, and they've only increased in population 20 or 30 times. And so to be able to utilize the facts and the data and the science of an agency that is appropriately managed, not just that species, but a ton of other species. And while there's criticism out there, and there's critics that will turn around and say, yeah, but what about this, and what about that, and they should be doing this. My ask to them is, would you rather have the antis do it? Because if you're criticizing CPW for what they do and you're not willing to stand up for what any game agency does, you might have a disagreement with them. You might not totally agree with their tactics or their maneuvering or their posturing or their data collection. Do you want the antis doing it? And that was one of the things that we came out on when we talked to the general public, when we presented to Democratic caucuses, when we talked to county commissions, when we went to a variety of different organizations and different fundraisers for other groups that were not ours. And the final words that we said, and I've said this often, don't listen to me, don't listen to CRWM, don't listen to Cats Aren't Trophies, listen to the experts. And that message resonated well enough, as you saw in the outcome of the election, for the majority of people to say, maybe they're right. Why the hell am I listening to anybody other than the experts? Why do we have the experts? Why do we have the managers if we're not going to listen to them? And our message was so broadly accepted with the general public, which is it's proven by the fact that what the wolf issue was voted on in 2020. Nobody supported CPW. Nobody asked about CPW. CPW didn't have any facts and data and statistics and studies to go on because we didn't have wolves that they could turn around and do. But they've been managing mountain lions for 60 years. And I think that keeping that at the forefront and us being able to be the voice box, the messenger for Colorado Parks and Wildlife, because they were gag ordered, their tongues were tied. And as you'll see in some upcoming episodes where people that knew the intimate knowledge, the boots on the ground of what had happened behind the scenes at different levels, Colorado Parks and Wildlife is handcuffed on what they can say and what they can't say. Whether I agree with it or not, that's a moot point. But the fact of the matter is, they essentially work at the pleasure of the governor, as does any game agency. And unless the governor in those states can tell them that they should be able to talk or not talk, they're going to continue to do what they're told to do. But the fact is that they stay with the science, and they stay with the facts and the data. And it's like the Upper Arkansas River lion study that they're doing, or the East Slope Mountain Lion Management Plan that was just recently passed at the November commission meeting after the election. Those are science-based driven studies that will help manage mountain lions for the next 40 or 50 years. But if you take that stuff off the plate, who's going to manage them? Who cares about them? The antis? No. Once it's done and over with, they don't care whether there's anything to do with them study-wise, money-wise, or any sort of habitat-wise. They don't put their money where their mouth is. They don't put any effort and dedication into sustaining them in perpetuity. They just gripe about the fact that we're harvesting them. And I think that message that we created started to resonate holistically, straight across the board, like a great big giant network, whether it was from Alabama or Arkansas or Michigan or Iowa. And those people started realizing and going, wait a minute, if you read the language and listen to what those guys in Colorado are talking about, this isn't just about bobcats and mountain lions. It's about science-based wildlife management. We had the same thing in Ohio. We had the same thing in Indiana. We had another thing in Florida. It might have been alligators, whitetails, and turkeys, but they could figure out that what we were talking about and the wording that was in the language could eventually affect them in some capacity because of the historical precedent and all the cliche terms that we used over time. And the antis kept saying everything that CPW said was wrong, everything that sportsmen said was wrong, everything that scientists and biologists said was wrong, everything that the commission said was wrong, everything that the legislature said was wrong. But by God, the antis knew best. And that's obvious by they've criticized every single level of our successes over the course of the last 5 or 6 years on mountain lions and bobcats because they know best. They're the experts. Ask them, they'll tell you. And they'll say it over and over and over again while everybody else is a bunch of blabbering idiots and doesn't have a flipping clue of what they're talking about, according to the antis.
Yeah, and on the Colorado voter side, we kept hearing, well, what does Parks and Wildlife think about this? And it's hard to say. I know what they think about it, but they're not allowed to say. And I kind of always go back to that famous Roosevelt quote, "The wildlife and its habitat cannot speak."
Yes.
And so we will and we must. I kind of started adding in the wildlife, its habitat, and its managers can't speak. So we, as running this fight, had to speak for them.
Exactly.
And you said it pretty early on. I think it might have been at Mile High. If you're going to go out and you're going to tell this story about wildlife management and lion hunting and management, you better know what you're talking about. And it took a lot for me and us on production side of stuff to fact check everything.
Because, on every level.
And every level, because they can go out and say anything that they want. We got to be so careful and have our ducks so in a row. And I think we did a pretty dang good job at being factual and quoting science and quoting what the experts were saying, whether they meant to or not. There was language in FAQ sheets and on the website, which, by the way,
yes,
all changed during this campaign.
Yep.
But the message that we said, which is, it was gathered from scientists at Parks and Wildlife and Parks and Wildlife literature, that it was real and it resonated. It came off as real. And so when the anti-hunters say something and a voter thinks, is that true? They can look it up.
Yes.
And it's going to be on our stuff. And our stuff is backed up on the Colorado Parks and Wildlife website. And then to your point about the audience that we reached was incredible. We turned it into, obviously you're not going to win this if you're like, hey, houndsman, this is a thing. Nobody cares about them. Mm-hmm. It's such a small population, but
just the same as the bobcat trappers or the bobcat harvesters. It's such a minute piece of the puzzle that, to your point, nobody would care except for those individual people, unless you convince the other people that they needed to care, that this was all part of the giant scheme to either take something away or the giant scheme to manage all of it, not just individual pieces of it.
Right. And we framed it in a way that this is why this matters, whether you're a houndsman or not, whether you hunt in Colorado or not. And we saw the turnout, donations from all 50 states, people coming up to you in Africa and this state and that state and other thing. And then it wasn't just the sporting community. We brought in people that it was going to impact, which is the ag producers in Colorado, people that have been picked on in the urban-rural divide. Why does this matter to them? Why does this matter to their livelihood, their culture, their way of life? And now the box that you're going to check is impacting all of these things. You're going to care about one of them.
Yes.
And I think that showed up on Election Day when we didn't lose. We didn't squeak by.
We kicked their crap out of them, is what we did. And I think when you look back at the stages that we had to go through and the negativity that we had to deal with, whether it was from organizations or individuals or maybe even just from government agencies or different states, it was almost a foregone conclusion that we were going to lose. Mm-hmm. Even when we went through the initial stages at the Title Board, Supreme Court, Secretary of State, We had the attorneys, we had the strategy teams. We went court after court after court after court for 3 freaking months to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars. And everybody kept saying, you're going to lose. You're going to lose. When we got the language changed and we took trophy hunting out of it, good for you, you're going to lose. And
what did that take? So for people that don't know, they came out with this ballot initiative that originally said, what was the original title of that?
the original title was the to prohibit trophy hunting in the state of Colorado when it came to bobcats, mountain lions, and lynx.
And if the only thing that you read on your ballot is the title, do you
prohibit
want to
trophy hunting.
prohibit trophy hunting? You did
Yep.
no other research. That's a pretty easy vote for
Yes.
the people who don't vote.
Yes.
I mean, duh. Yeah, I don't agree with trophy hunting.
Well, and the thing is, nobody could define trophy hunting. Nobody could actually
Right.
explain trophy hunting. Nobody could connect the difference between, is it trophy hunting? Does it include only if you're going to mount something, or if you're going to? Their interpretation was they found a cliche term that would work to the non-educated, non-hunting voting audience. The trophy hunting was bad. But once we convinced them that it didn't have anything to do with trophy hunting, because now the title didn't say trophy hunting.
What was that argument? How did you get that out of? Explain this process, because I think it's worth teaching this process from beginning to end to other states and other people. This fight started at the Supreme Court level. How did you get that? What was the argument to get that language?
The main argument
changed?
was just what I just said, was the fact that what is trophy hunting? It's a cliche term, and for people to vote on something that really doesn't have any skin or any teeth to it, how do you turn around and allow the electorate to be able to turn around and vote on something that doesn't really have any tangible connection to it? One of the arguments that I made was, and I've said this on podcast, my wife harvested a doe deer the first year we were together, for almost 40 years ago. It's mounted on our wall. So that's a trophy? To whom? Well, to her it is, but under the law, would it be defined as trophy hunting, or the definition, would it be defined as trophy hunting? What about the kid that has a brand new beagle dog and he wants to go rabbit hunting and he turns around and chases the rabbit out and the kid shoots the rabbit? Is that a trophy? How about a 5-pound brown trout that a kid caught for the first time? Is that a trophy? And so getting the title board and the Supreme Court to understand that trophy hunting was not something that you could hang a hat on. You couldn't turn around and say, we're going to ban all trophy hunting. It's like we're going to ban all ball sports. Okay, does that mean like football and soccer, baseball, basketball, golf, pool, everything? I mean, there has to be something that they could connect to it. The language has to be on the title. It has to be a single subject. And the way that they incorporated all the language that they wanted to do to start with, when it had to do with prohibiting the use of GPS collars, tracking devices, and trophy hunting. But then it also had to do with lynx, bobcats, and mountain lions, which, while we didn't win the argument, we created a lot of consternation in the title board, because lynx are a threatened and endangered species in the state of Colorado and federally. Bobcats are managed as a small game fur bearer, different classification, and mountain lions are managed as a big game animal. So we argued the fact that that was not a single subject. It was 3 different specific classifications for 3 different management objectives. One that you had to take a test on, that you're only allowed 1 animal to harvest. Then bobcats, you didn't have to take a test, but you didn't need a big game animal, a big game license for it. You just needed a fur bearer or a small game permit. And lynx, you couldn't turn around and harvest anyway. So 3 different classifications in there, along with trophy. And one of the arguments that we had was, okay, what's a trophy? How can you have 3 different classifications and you define trophy out of any one of those 3, or all 3 of those combined? So when they took trophy hunting out of it, then it became a hunting ban. And our argument through the whole process of the trophy hunting side of it was, this is not a trophy hunting ban. This is a hunting ban, because you cannot define trophy. There's no way, shape, or form. It's just that trophy's a bad word according to the antis. But as we just explained, what is the definition of trophy? Trophy is not in the Webster's Encyclopedia or Dictionary about where it should be and what it should be as far as game laws and management objectives in the North American model. Most people think of a trophy and they think of something you put on your wall, or maybe Bobby's trophy wife, or maybe something that you have, but it's a trophy. There's something you can identify. You can't do that on something that has such a wide variety of interpretations for a wide variety of species. And while Jan Demoski, who we've talked to in this whole process. She killed a bighorn sheep. To her, that was a trophy, and it's a nice bighorn. Is it a world record? No. So if it doesn't go into the trophy book like Boone and Crockett, is it a trophy? If it doesn't fall under the Samson Law or the federal guidelines that federal works into state guidelines, is it a trophy? And I think that's where people need to understand that the work that was done at the forefront of this to help define trophy itself and how that was taken out. Now this became a hunting ban, and they still went forward with it. They still went forward with the same language and terminology and verbiage. And instead of saying, we want to do a hunting ban, they still went out and they called everybody the big bad trophy hunter. Everybody was a trophy hunter. Then they started calling bighorn sheep hunters trophy hunters and elk hunters trophy hunters. We were all trophy hunters because our intent was to harvest something. It didn't say that in a title. It didn't say it anywhere in the measure. It didn't have anything to do with what would end up in regulation, but that's what they lied and they deceived about, that this is a trophy hunting ban. And I kept asking people through the whole process, Sean, how do you vote on a trophy hunting ban when the title doesn't have anything to be considered about trophy at all?
With that out of the title, it was pretty easy from our standpoint to call it what it was. They kept calling it a trophy ban to their people.
Yes.
We kept calling what it was on the title.
Ban.
It's a hunting ban.
Exactly.
And this is why, and I think, there's a lot of work to be done telling the story of harvesting mature animals to the general public. Is, why do you want to kill a 380 bull or a big old mature ram? Because they're not going to make it anyway.
No.
It's a good way to manage species as a whole. You take that old class out, and then there was another lie that they kept saying that, it leaves this void if you take a mature tom out for young juveniles to come in, and they're the ones that are causing all of the wildlife conflict. And I talked to one of the biologists that we worked with. That's not necessarily true.
No.
There's a lot of holes in the study that they quote on that.
Jerry Abker said one thing when we testified and when they came to the Parks and Wildlife Commission meeting in 2019. And Jerry used to be the carnivore fur-bearer biologist for Colorado Parks and Wildlife before he retired. And when he stepped off, he ended up testifying on our behalf there in Grand Junction when that became a citizen's petition. And one of the most telling things that he said was, you want to make sure that you have a beautiful lawn, beautiful golf course, beautiful landscape. You're not concerned with one blade of grass. And I think that he translated that into, you want to know that your elk population is healthy and your mountain lion population is healthy and your duck population is healthy. You're not worried about one duck or one mountain lion. And in theory, you're not worried about 20 of them or 50 of them or 100 of them. You're worried about the entire landscape of whatever wildlife species you have, just like you do on a golf course or a lawn. I wanted to mention the fact that, we go back to Senate Bill 22-031, which is when we fought at the legislature. We beat them at the Parks and Wildlife Commission for 3 years running. When they went to the legislature in 22, listen to the language of this. Their language, the title of the bill was prohibit hunting of bobcat, lynx, and mountain lion. They lost at that level. We knocked the crap out of them. So their only other way to come back for something they thought they could win, well, we already lost, they said, on hunting. Now let's go for trophy hunting. So they went for trophy hunting. We took that out. We went back to a hunting deal. I felt more confident when we took that out based upon what we had done for the previous 4 years at the commission and the General Assembly, because they'd already lost on the wording where it says prohibit hunting. And I think that most people that, at least in our rank and file, realized that we had more than just a puncher's chance to be able to beat this because it wasn't a trophy hunting ban. If it was a trophy hunting ban, I think that maybe it would have passed. But how would you enforce that? Where would it draw the line? How would you interpret or define trophy? And how would that translate over to the many other species or the many other size and classifications of the maturity of those species? And I think that the point that we made was trophy itself is not definable. You cannot create a message for somebody that is trying to create a message that they interpret for themselves to where it's going to stick for the people that are going to make the final decisions.
And their attempt at defining trophy became the actual definition of hunting, which I think people saw right through.
Yes.
But you didn't. I mean, you mentioned going back 3 years in the commission. Like, you didn't just walk off a trap line into this fight. Like, this has been building, and you've seen this coming. And kind of talk about being prepared for it. And then, we saw your face everywhere. You did.
I'm sorry.
How many? Yeah. You were on how many podcasts? We did how many shoots together? You were at this show and that show. And like, Dan Gates went from being a bearded guy in the woods that you saw rarely to seeing him freaking everywhere.
Yeah, I was on enough boards and committees initially to turn around and make it to where I didn't want to be in the public any more than what I had to be. But I valued the participation at engagement. And I was appointed by Governor Polis, and previously to that, I was appointed by Governor Hickenlooper, and I was appointed by Director Broscheid, and I was appointed by Director Prinsloo. And I've sat on multiple boards and committees, and I've represented sportsmen and conservation ways and messages for the course of, the better part of the last 15 years. When we formulated CRWM, we did so with the intent of being able to provide lobbying representation at the state capitol, which we did within a year. And we've got Kathleen Curry and Richard Orff and Diana Orff as our lobbyists at the Capitol. We were successful on leading the charge at multiple levels at the commission and at the General Assembly. And when this was starting to kind of simmer a little bit, the crab pots were soaking. We'd already kicked the crap out of them, so to speak. And because of their favorable positions with the governor, with the administration here, and with the governor's spouse, Marlon Reese, when we got those guys essentially against us because of commission appointments and the way things had kind of played out at different levels, we knew that you can only beat the dragon back from the edge of the door for so long before they turn around and pull out the big guns. And they did. And they pulled out the big guns, and they hired Wayne Pacelli, or he volunteered with all his money and his background with the Animal Welfare Action, and then I think it's a Institute for Humane Economy or Center for Humane Economy. But Pacelli used to be the former HSUS, Humane Society of the United States CEO. And he was forced to leave for a variety of different reasons. And if you're not sure what those reasons are, you can look that up on the internet and look up Wayne Pacelli. I mean, it's not anything to do with wildlife. It has to do with people. But he's not the representative of anti-extremist individuals in the state of Colorado. He's an extremist organizer out of the East Coast, Virginia, Washington, D.C., Maryland. And they brought their funding because they thought after, this is my interpretation and based upon the facts, it's pretty valid, they thought that after the wolf issue passed by a small margin here, that this was their opportunity to turn around and capitalize on a ballot initiative, a citizens-driven ballot initiative with money from out of state on a large scale. And if you look at the people that supported this on the front side, Carol Baskins off the Tiger King, if you looked at what they did over the course of the last 12 or 15 years in their life and what they were trying to accomplish, they all saw the same intent of what they wanted to get done. And they thought that the landscape in Colorado was very, very appealing to them and that they could turn around and capitalize on any of that. And we were fortunate enough to hold them back. And how I got involved to the level that I got involved was more than a chance of luck or a stroke of genius. But I had been playing knowing that these conversations were in the works. Ballot initiative was likely. We knew they couldn't do it in 23 because they didn't have enough time, but you couldn't, on odd years, you couldn't run a ballot initiative pertaining to anything other than taxes. So it had to be on an even year. And on September 22nd of 23, when they filed that, I was the second call that Mark Truex with PacWest gave, and he said, well, they dumped it like what we thought that they would, and what do you want to do? Well, because of the way CRWM was formulated, we're not a membership organization. We are a advocacy group of 5 individual board members, and we have followers, and we have contributors, and we have partners and collaborators, but we're not membership, so we don't have to answer to the members themselves. We answer to the board. I made the phone call. The board said unanimously to move forward with whatever we needed to do and expend whatever resources we had. And we started building up for what we thought was going to probably be a very, very long fight. And it turned out to be so. But I think that the antis had no knowledge that we were as well prepared as what we were. They didn't have any knowledge that we were as intestinally fortified as what we were, and that we didn't already have the strategic alignment built like what we did, and that we didn't have the wherewithal to be able to turn around and continue to move proactively and adaptively and nimbly to counter every single thing that they possibly did for a 4-month period going through the legal process. And that was obvious by us putting them in a corner. And when I started doing what I was doing, and I got to give credit where credit's due because it's well-deserved, Santino Castellanos was the first podcast that I was ever on with Beyond the Cast. Shortly after that, I was at the Mission Theater with Steve Ranella on the live show that they did, and Derek Wolf was on there. That's where I met Jordan Budd and Giannis Patelis, and they packed the house. That escalated us up to a level of recognition and relevancy to the point to where then things started coming in, and it started coming in by partner organizations and partner entities that offered us such generosity to participate. And it seems weird because we're going on a year now since that. But they offered us shows, and they offered us platforms and speaking engagements, and they offered us booths, and they offered us things to be able to come present to their convention or their banquet or their fundraiser. Mostly because what we started the message of is I'm a sportsman. And I'm a sportsman translated into you're a sportsman, and he's a sportsman, and she's a sportsman. And I'm not a bow hunter, and I'm not an elk hunter, I'm not a predator hunter, and I'm not a fisherman. I'm all of those underneath of the umbrella. I'm a sportsman. And I think that that's where it got to the point to where, we joke about this, and with all due respect, I mean, Bobby's been more than generous on his time and efforts with, and I say that, Bobby Marshall with the Mountainside Podcast. But what was allowed for us to do was something that everybody else wanted a piece of the action. They didn't want a piece of my bearded action. They didn't want a piece of because I was the tip of the spear, the spokesperson. They wanted a piece of something that resonated with them and their audience to be able to turn around and express that out. I did 86 podcasts, 84 before the election from essentially, I did the first Rockcast podcast on January 1st with Travis Hobbs of Rockcast. And I just did another with them not too long ago. And it was weird because it was like 11 months beforehand. That was the first one. And I did 86 in that time period. I wasn't going to turn a podcast down, whether an animal rights activist called us out or Oprah Winfrey or the trash union out of Chicago, because I felt that was the only message that we were going to be able to get out because we couldn't afford to advertise it. And we knew that we couldn't stay within the state boundaries themselves. We had to go to Alabama and Florida and Maine and Wisconsin and California. We had to have that outreach to where everybody else carried our message for us. And I think that put the antis on their heels to the point. And while I won't get into too much of the specifics, some of it, but it also drew significant attention to me and my family and my profession and my business. These people don't fight fair. And when you become the tip of the spear and you're willing to turn around and put your head on the chopping block, there's some lunatic bastard out there that are going to willing to turn around and try to chop it off. And people need to fully understand that when you hang your hat on something that is so important to you, that they're going to do everything they can possibly do to drive you away from it. They're going to turn around and do everything they could do to shame and admonish and belittle and threaten and harass and assault. Legally or illegally, they will do it. And it creates such pressure to be able to stay in the fight. And I had a chip on my shoulder to the point to where I was thinking, it can't continually go on like this. And if it does, if I'm the guy to be chosen to be able to do so, bring it on. We're proud to partner with Minturn Anglers, one of our primary sponsors. Minturn Anglers is Colorado's premier fly shop and guide service for both Denver and the Front Range and the Vail Valley. If you're looking to get geared up for your next outing or looking to spend a day on the river with one of our expert guides, Minturn Anglers is the one-stop shop for all your fly fishing needs. Minturn Anglers is proud to partner with the Coloradans for Responsible Wildlife Management to help protect our fishing and hunting heritage here in Colorado. Use promo code SAVETHEHUNT for 15% off all trips and gear online at minturnanglers.com.
I think everybody who put their name on something or listened to a podcast or gave $5 or $5,000 saw the effort that came from you, from the team as a whole. Largely, you were the face of it. The sacrifice that you made, the time away from home, the time away from business, it took a monumental effort, but I think what was accomplished was, for the first time that I've seen, for the first time that people have been doing this a lot longer than me have ever seen, there was a movement created in the sportsman's universe.
Exactly.
That hadn't been seen. Shoot, can we go back to the Roosevelt stuff, like the beginning of the North American model? Like, is it far-fetched to say that? Because for how long have we been saying, we got to tell our story, we got to stop infighting, we got to stop my way or this way, and it became, if I want to sell my product, knife, camo, whatever it is, I got to join this fight, because if I don't join this fight, I'll never sell it again. It may be 20 years down the line, but my business is done, because that's how big of an existential threat this was. That wasn't some hyperbole that we made up, and people saw that.
I think they got tired of seeing me, but they couldn't turn me off. And if that makes any sense, because I was staying on the same story. Now, with our podcast series that we're doing, we're going to turn around and expand into different levels of what it takes to continue to prop up and elevate the opportunity to save the hunt, not just in Colorado, but not just on mountain lions, but a variety of different species and methods of take and states. But I got to say that if we're not going to fight in some capacity 365 days a year for the opportunity to turn around and engage for 5 days or 20 days or 30 days if you draw a sheep tag, or maybe it's the 30-day the archery season, or maybe it's in 4 different states. If we're not going to fight for the opportunity to be able to go do it, is it really worth doing? The antis think it is, because they want to fight 365 days out of the year, and they're trying to do it across 50 states. We need to figure out a way to get states involved, similar to what we built here. I'm not saying everybody's got to emulate and duplicate and replicate every single thing that CRWM did, but I tell you what we did along with our partners, what we did along with the collaborative effort and the fundraising and all the messaging and the outreach and the behind-the-scenes stuff, what we did were all that playbook and that roadmap has been built, and the antis are going to watch out for that in Virginia and in Ohio and in Kansas and again in Colorado and any other state that they choose to turn around and go after. We have the opportunity to see what worked and then modify that, adapt off of it, be nimble. But it worked, and it sent them on their heels in a blue state with a blue governor and a blue secretary of state and a blue treasurer and a blue attorney general and the majority of the legislature, to a point to where even sensible Democrat-type people, and I hate to put Democrats and Republicans in the same category when it comes to hunting, but I hate to put them aside when it comes to hunting, because all Republicans don't support guns and pro-hunt, and all Democrats aren't anti-hunters and anti-gun.
Well, I think we turned it into something that wasn't a blue versus red. It was a, do you care about wildlife issue?
Yes.
And if you do, which pretty much everybody does, even if you live in places where there's not a ton of wildlife, if you care about wildlife, this is how it impacts you. If you've never seen, I've seen 2 cats in my entire life. Mm-hmm. They're cool as hell. If you stop hunting cats, this is how it impacts my life.
You stop hunting cats, this is how it impacts your life. But look at the message that was created amongst people like Bobby, the Ranellas, Clay Newcombs, Howl for Wildlife, Cable Smith with Lone Star Outdoors, and Bo Martinek, and Sloan Brown, and Jonathan Redbeard, and Bear Handlin, and you name it. I mean, Cliff Gray. I mean, I could go on and on and on. And when I was on the Rockcast after the election, I told them, I said, I'm going to feel bad when I start naming people and companies and organizations and entities, because unless I've got the list here of 10,854 individual donors, I'm going to leave somebody out.
Mm-hmm.
But the antis didn't think that was possible. They never saw a movement come together with that sort of statewide, nationwide outreach to create this movement, this giant amoeba that was just moving along with the flow of lava, because it was ongoing over and over and over. And you could tell that they were losing their brains, because then they started coming out and attacking me, whether it was in cartoon characters, whether it was in video clips, whether it was there at functions and events where they would send 3 or 4 people at one time. You could tell that they had to turn around and try to disrupt what we were doing. They had to skew our message because their message wasn't working. So they needed to turn around and try to call me or us across the line, I don't know, to throw the first blow or to say something derogatory. I went to multiple meetings and there'd be a cell phone in my face and 5 people sitting there trying to harass you. They were looking for their opportunity because they knew that their lies and their fallacies and falsehoods and their tactics were not resonated well enough with the target audience. So they started attacking whomever they could attack.
Right. You're losing the message, so you start changing the subject.
Yeah. Look at the stuff that they did. I mean, it just showed how, if that's the way that they think that wildlife should be managed, I feel sorry for where our future wildlife management procedures go.
And going back to the movement side of things, I think the issues that are going to come up in the future, whether they're Colorado or whatever state, like every fight's going to be different. There's going to be different people leading that charge. But I think the lesson is the movement's here, man. Ask for help. Call Dan Gates at CRWM. How'd you do this? What's your advice on this? Go to shows. People are going to say, hey, I heard about your thing. How can we help? Who made you stuff? Like, every time we had a conversation is, this is what's going on the landscape. This is what we need to do out there. And, oh, by the way, Outdoor Edge made me thousands of knives, and we're going to split the profits on it. And it was just because they cared about, like, this community came out in full force. And for me, being a part of that, like, that's a special thing to be a part of that. You don't get the opportunity to do but once in your life, maybe.
Well, I hope we don't have to do it very damn often, because I don't have the time and the effort in my brain to be able to turn around and do it, but I'm willing to. I'm willing to turn around and step up and do it again. They want to come back to the commission. They want to go back to the legislature. They want to do another ballot. Same as what they wanted to attack me and my family and my business. Bring it on. Because I'm not going to go away. I was here before them. I'll continue to be here after them. I think the movement will be here after them. I think that what we built with the United Houndsmen of Colorado, Safari Club International, the Wild Sheep Foundation, Rocky Mountain Bighorn, National Wild Turkey, Mule Deer Foundation, you start naming all of these. You look at the small groups, Golden High Country Archers, for crying out loud. What they did behind the scenes, the money that they raised, Kachara Archery. I mean, you look at the individual businesses, you look at the houndsman associations or the trap clubs in other states. Hey, we had a fundraiser. We only did $1,500, but we wanted to send it your direction. Hey, we had this raffle. We don't have much money out of it, but we got you $575. Or somebody would turn around and say, hey, I canceled my hunt to go elk hunting in Nebraska, and here's my outfitter fee of $2,500. People saw a value, and that wasn't just residents. People saw a value, and I think that that's something that sportsmen and women, whether you contributed or whether you didn't contribute, need to be cognizant of. They need to be proud of. And they need to know that somebody else stepped up for them or instead of them in some cases. Mike Costello with Howl for Wildlife said many, many times, if everybody that applied for a license in the state of Colorado through the preference point deal or whatever would send the cost of a box of bullets. Of course, we joked about that. Is it a box of 22 bullets or a box of 375 Win Mag bullets or 300 Win Ultra Mag? If everybody took that as serious as what Mike had indicated, it would have been undeniably the most monumental effort that we could ever put together. And as it turned out, we didn't get that sort of a response from people but it was still the most monumental, epic outcome that you could possibly get. But the point about that is if they go to Texas or if they go to Arizona like they just recently tried to, which they might still be able to turn around and go back to the commission, but if they continually try to do what they're doing in Washington and Oregon, or maybe they want to move into Idaho on wolves, or maybe they want to go into, grizzly bears and wolves in Montana, if they continually do that and there's nobody to stand in their way, it's going to happen. They ran into a buzzsaw in Colorado, first and foremost, because CRWM was there. Mm-hmm. CRWM had already built the relationships, already had the lobbying in place at the Capitol, already had all the victories in place, had the strategy, had the funding. We already had it in place. We didn't have to build it in preparation of. If other states would start to think about that preemptively and proactively, when they came to knock on their door in Nevada or New Mexico, pick up the phone, call CRWM, say, hey, we've already got this thing formulated. What can we do to accelerate it, enhance it, to promote it? We can't help you build everything from scratch when you got a 4-month window of an opportunity to commission or a legislature or a ballot initiative. If you don't preemptively plan and try to build up a moat or a roadblock there, it's going to be really, really hard to start from scratch. But we started this process with CRWM in 2016. And the first time we had to really beat them back, even though we had little wins, was 2019, and then 2020, 21, 22, and then 24. But we built strength in numbers and strength in messaging. And if you remember in Senate Bill 31 in 2022, there was a guy over in the Western Slope that put up a GoFundMe page. Garrett Gillespie put up a GoFundMe page. I hope Garrett doesn't get mad that I named him out. But, that was a $80,000 to $100,000 stipend that came in a 2-week period so we could turn around and beat them back on Senate Bill 31. So when people look back, this was not something that just happened in 3 weeks before the election. It didn't happen 6 weeks in front of the election. It happened over the course of the last 6 years to be able to make it go to that election so we could be able to fund it. But you're not going to do that if you start your organization in September and the election is in November. You can't do that if you start your organization in December and there's a bill coming up in January. You have to be able to be preemptive and strike ahead of the snake to make sure that you have a chance to survive.
And also, but on the other side of that, like the complacency of like, well, I don't have enough time or I don't have enough, like that's got to stop. Like we always said, yeah, we should have started this 30 years ago and we wouldn't be in this position. Well, we didn't. Do it now. Start the fight. Like start that charge to get after it, because the fight's going to change and species and take and whatever is going to change. The story's going to be the same. That's what's in your favor. And if you have 30 years of experience in this, you're better set up. But if you start right now, trust the story, trust the messaging. It's there for you, and you can win with that.
For anybody that thinks that they know why we're doing this podcast, that they know why we're going to continually try to message a couple times a week and do 1 or 2 longer versions a month, it's so we don't have to go back to the well and try to draft and try to scout and try to build an army when we absolutely need it again. It's because we'll have it in place. We'll continue to be able to message. We'll continue to be able to that message resonate with people and keep them informed. Some of the stuff that we're kicking out on some of these little updates is about how to engage at the commission, how to engage at the General Assembly and the legislature, how to find out about bills, how to write a letter to your legislator or to a commissioner, how to show up, how about maybe just looking at the documents and what's the agenda so you know what's coming up. If you can't put the time and effort and dedicate that into when it's needed, when it's not needed, how do you do it when it's needed when it's needed? It's always needed because it's always happening, but you don't want to be behind the 8 ball. Nobody is going to wish that they trained too hard, for too long, for too much effort if they're successful. If they're not successful, they're going to think we didn't do it enough, we didn't go back far enough, we didn't raise enough money, we didn't have enough teamwork and team members. We all have it, and you talked about time. Our board, you, myself, created a significant amount of time for this entire effort. My wife and I figured, and I could tell you wholeheartedly, that my average week for 14 months was 90 hours a week. this year, past year in 2024, was the first time that I never hunted in the state of Colorado in 49 years.
Wow.
I turned licenses in, and I didn't apply for other licenses. I've got a cow elk tag that's still good for a 5-month cow season that I still don't have time to turn around and go deal. For somebody to tell me I don't have time or it's not worth the effort, I'd like to know why they think everybody else should fight on their behalf, why everybody else should put the time and the effort and stay away from their family and to deal with all the trials and tribulations and to create an endurance marathon to be able to do things on their behalf when they won't turn around and do it themselves. This is not going to go away. If I die tomorrow, and if you're not able to turn around and continue to do what you do, is there somebody that's going to step up in our tracks to immediately take it over? At this point, I don't see it. I don't think so. But we need to get to a point to where we have people that say, I don't have much time, but I can do a little bit. But right now, we still have a lot of people that say, I don't have any time. I don't have the time. We all have the same amount of time in a day. Just decide what we're going to do with it. I know guys that did not contribute, so I'm calling them out, that did not contribute. There were naysayers that said, good luck, we think you're going to lose, that spent more time looking at numbers and preference points and where they're going to apply and what they're going to do for their different states. They spent more time in that whole process than they've ever spent in the decision-making process, the legal side of the process, to testify, to write a letter, to talk to their legislators, to let them know they're a constituent. I know guys that have spent more time planning for the hunt while I'm out there fighting for the hunt, while you're fighting for the hunt, than they've ever spent to turn around and go and try to turn around and help that cause. One of the Through the Gates and the CRWM sponsors has been the Salida Gun Shop at Salida, Colorado. If you haven't stopped by to see Adam or Josiah and see the selection and the quality of goods and the experience that Salida Gun Shop provides, you're missing out. For more information, go to SalidaGunshop.com for a positive experience for all levels of firearm ownership. We'd also like to thank Salida Gun Shop for supporting our efforts and helping to defeat Proposition 127. Salida Gun Shop really stepped up in a remarkable manner to where they help provide all levels of continuity and collaboration to the industry. Make sure that you check out SalidaGunshop.com, and for a little bit of a gimmick of what Salida Gun Shop did, you can also look and see the patches that were created especially for our victory on 127. Make sure you check out SalidaGunshop.com. Stop in to see Adam or Josiah when you're in the neck of the woods, and look for the experience of a lifetime when it comes to firearms ownership.
What I can tell you, too, from my perspective, and I think the sacrifice on my end and what I asked of my family to pick up the slack and the sacrifice that they made was a fraction of what you went through. That's what it took. But to be a part of that is not something that you get to do often in life.
No.
And to come out on the other side of that when you're completely stressed out and tapped out and still into it, and we're having this conversation of, I need this thing yesterday and I need these couple things moving forward. I don't have the time to do that, but I freaking found it. Mm-hmm. And you found it, and you found the time, the energy, and the amount of times that I had text from Dan Gates at 4:00 in the morning, and then we had an hour-long conversation.
Bobby did too.
And yeah, and you know what? That's what it took. But to come out of that, and you're thinking, every time I'm thinking, man, we're rolling on this, I'd see something, I'm gonna like, oh my God, how are we going to win this thing? Like, we went to the Lionheart thing, and that was inspirational and a great film. And it's a great story that Robbie told. And then we're in downtown Denver, and I know you looked at me, you're like, how the hell are we going to win this thing with this town? Mm-hmm. And
we walked outside, and there's girls walking down the street with pink hair, smoking weed.
How do you get them to vote? But you know what? It's like, you keep on it because you think, maybe there's a shot that we have at this. And every time you think, man, how, are we going to win this thing? You go an extra mile and you see the stuff that they say, and that fired me right back up. And it's like, nope, I'm not going to let them win this thing. And it took everything from you, from me, from Jerry and Lyle and Crystal and the people that came out and wrote articles and volunteered time. And it just takes that sacrifice. And my plea is, be a part of it, because the next time you go out hunting, it's going to mean that much more to you.
Well, and it was even doubly hard, triply hard, quadruply hard for us, because once January came along, I was invited to all these other functions to go spread the word,
Right.
to try to get the message out, to try to do some fundraising. We still had the Parks and Wildlife Commission to deal with. We still had the General Assembly, the legislature to deal with. So for 5 months, we had both of those and all of this stuff. And then when the legislature recessed in May, we still had the commission to deal with. And then we still had the campaign to deal with. And you compile all that into the same pot. It's one big fight. It's just that how do you compartmentalize where you need to go and what you need to do and who you're going to get to do it. And if to your point, I mean, me texting you at 4:00 in the morning, it's because I was awake since 2. And if I texted you at midnight, it's because I didn't go to bed until 2. There's some things there that the antis have built up in a strategy, money-wise, people-wise, strategy-wise, and it's hard to explain to the average sportsman of how important it is to make sure that you make your mark. Now, with all due respect, the people that showed up to the events, and there again, I could go through and name a bunch of different names, and it's inspirational to me to see the young women and young men that have showed up that have families, that have businesses, that were willing to turn around and sacrifice some time, and they're going, well, the bearded bastard wants me to turn around and go do this. I guess I'll do that. And they sacrifice family time, and they sacrifice hunting time, and they sacrifice business time. That's what it took to be able to turn around and get to where we ended up. But the motivating factor to get those people involved, they saw something in what we were doing for them. That's why we got the donations that we got. That's why we got the podcasts that we got. That's why we got the business support and the organizational support, because they saw something that what we at CRWM were building on behalf of them, that we could turn around and say, we need your organization to be a partner, and we need you to be an ambassador, and we need you to be a continuing resource of what we built, but not just what we built for the campaign. It's stuff we've been talking about the whole time. For those that haven't paid attention, the mission of CRWM is to enhance, promote, and defend the North American model of wildlife conservation and responsible wildlife management, period. That's it. The podcast is similar to that. Well, it's extending the message. We have to figure out a way for people to feel like that they are responsible for what they get to do. They haven't felt like that they are part of the equation. And they've left too much up to legislators and commissioners and to the voter to decide what they're going to be able to do. Hunters and anglers, sportsmen and women in the United States and Canada would be undeniably the most formidable opposition to any outlier organization out there, period. If we came together on every single issue, and I'm not saying every single 14 million sportsmen and women deal, but if we came together on every single issue, we would never have to be in these issues again, because they would know that it's not a money-making deal and they're not going to be able to turn around and take it away. We've got more organizations. We've got more money. We've got more endowments. We got more in the industry. We got more fundraising that we could possibly have, because this is who we are. We talk about history, tradition, and heritage. Well, let's freaking fight for it till we act like it's history, tradition, and heritage.
And normalize it. I was lucky enough to harvest an elk during archery season this year in an area that's pretty populated, where I come out, my truck's parked on the highway, and there's people looking at, like, they're leaf peeping, and I got a quarter on my back, and I'm kind of trying to sneak around, and I was like, wait a minute. I talk about this stuff for a living. Mm-hmm. So if you want to come up to me and talk to me about it, I'm happy to have that conversation. And I'm going to have it, and I'm going to talk about the habitat that I've seen out there and how it's not going to support these elk, right? Like, there's a lot of elk and not a lot of grass, and I'm also going to take this home and I'm going to feed my family with it. And, I had 2 days of enjoyable experience, and I was like, you got to get over that stigma, and also, like, normalize it for the general public of tell that story. I think that's kind of where we're headed, of just completely normalize hunting, because hunting is responsible wildlife management.
Yes. Hunting is responsible wildlife management. And without hunting, responsible wildlife management essentially doesn't exist. Without the funding, responsible wildlife management doesn't exist.
Without the funding and without the tool.
Well, I think method of take can be criticized or scrutinized at so many different levels depending on people's background and perspectives or their ideologies. I mean, stop and think. They were trying to bastardize the use of hounds. And we use hounds to turn around and catch mountain lions so we can put collars on them and study mountain lions. It wasn't so much about the hounds. It's about the attempt to kill. But it's about the attempt to kill anything. I've said this about, I think it was 17, 18 years ago, and I testified in front of the commission meeting at the time. It was the Division of Wildlife at the time, 2007, before the merge. And one of the statements that I made with a couple of my adversaries was, the only number that's satisfied to them is 0. It's not that we do too many. It's not that we don't know what we do and how many we should take. It's that they don't think you should do any. Their number is 0, period, on any of it. If you really got into the deer and elk side of it, I think that their number would be 0 because they want more wolves, they want grizzly bears, they want more bears, they want more mountain lions on the landscape. We got to be able to feed them. I'm not saying we should or shouldn't have any of that as long as they're appropriately managed by the agency that deems what we should be able to do or not do. And if they get out of population objectives, we should be able to take the population that they've deemed necessary that you could be able to do. The general public doesn't fully comprehend what goes into the life of a deer as soon as it's bred, and they try to keep the mother alive, to where that fawn or that calf turns around and hits the ground. And then what happens to try to keep that calf or that fawn alive? And I'm just using deer and elk as an example. But all of the stuff that animal has to go through, whether it's traffic, whether it's highway frontage and wildlife crossings, whether it's urban sprawl, whether it's disease, whether it's habitat, whether it's climate conditions, whether it's predation, whether it's hunting pressure, whether it's, you name it. There's so many different things that are out there. Yeah, your dog off a leash. That's a perfect example. I mean, recreation, just the recreation side of it. If you explain that to the public and get a chance to talk to them 1-on-1 or 10-on-1 or 100-on-1, they start to look at things in a different light because maybe it's part of them that you just explained. But maybe they've seen that before. Maybe they've been told that before, but they didn't get told that in so much context that it was in so many different things. It was just one thing or the other. That's part of education. But education in wildlife management is adaptive because it doesn't all apply in the same level. Eastern Colorado is different than the Front Range. Front Range is different than the middle part of the state. The middle part of the state is different than the Western Slope. It's all different in the wintertime for a variety of different reasons. Explaining that, let's just leave it up to the experts and let them make the decisions. We should be participants in that process, but we should not be instigators and facilitators of that process unless it's necessary for us to turn around and try to do it for the better of the wildlife. Not just because somebody says don't, not just because somebody says your number should be 0. And that's what they were saying on this level, and I think that that's what they'd say on any level when it comes to ballot initiatives. And I think that the biggest travesty that we've got when it comes to citizens' petitions and initiatives is the fact that we allow people that don't know anything about anything to vote on something. And I don't care whether it's about roads and bridges or taxes or anything else. We all have opinions. But wildlife should not be subject to opinions of the unknowing general public unless the scientists say that we need to do something different.
And I think people are starting to turn around and recognize that, and we're here pleading to the sportsmen to show up and engage in the fight. But I'm also going to plead to the voters, the public, who maybe will stumble across this and hear this. Go ask questions. Go ask Colorado Parks and Wildlife or whatever Department of Natural Resources in your state, because having made films for and worked with biologists at Parks and Wildlife, they're fascinating people, and they do amazing work, and they do the coolest stuff in some of the most wild places, and they get to put their hands on animals and DNA in the snow. And if you ask questions, they're going to tell you. And you want to know how wildlife is managed and start peel back that curtain and peel back the onion, ask them, because it's fascinating. And they are I love filming with passionate people, and I think that's why you and I hit it off too. They are some of the most passionate people about what they do, and they will talk at general level to give you a base idea, and they will go deep into the weeds if you want to get there.
Yeah, to the point to where you want to know more about boreal toads than you ever thought you wanted to know. They can tell you.
Sure, man.
And so Bobby's laughing. I mean, it's the truth. I mean, when you have 961 species of wildlife, most people think about wolves and elk and bighorn sheep. They don't consider pikas. I mean, I've talked about pikas to people before, and they're like, "What the hell is a pika?" And you show them, and they're like, "Well, I've seen those." Well, you've seen them, but you didn't know what they were. Or you turn around and explain about a marmot. You mean like a groundhog? That's kind of like a groundhog, but it's in the rocks, and it's lots bigger than a groundhog.
What's their role, and what do they provide on the landscape?
Yeah.
And how do they tie in with lynx and bobcat and everything? And it's cool to start figuring out how all that stuff is interconnected on a landscape that is some of the stuff we love the most, right? Is those high peaks, those open spaces, the clean waterways.
Well, I think what we're trying to do is, and just to be open and transparent, be very candid about it, we're trying to build this messaging platform to be able to extend short, medium, and long versions of message that are relevant to the conversation, not just strictly related to wildlife. Maybe it's about habitat. Maybe it's about other natural resources. Maybe it's about water. Maybe it's about agriculture. Everybody that has an interest in the outdoors, the North American model, the Wild Harvest Initiative, science-based wildlife management, we're trying to build a platform to where they can go to and feel like that they're getting the information that maybe has been missing or they've been lacking. Just like some of the stuff that we're going to do on some of the short tutorial posts about how to engage. Those sites are there. The average person doesn't even know. You know, I've had multiple interviews before, and I said, "Do you want to go to the Capitol?" "I can't go to the Capitol." "Why can't you go to the Capitol?" And there's this perception that there's this Emerald City, the land of Oz, that you can't go knock on the wizard's door unless you're invited. Well, I'm inviting you. But once they go there, they're like, "Well, these are just general regular people." And I'm like, "Yeah, they're the ones that you supposedly helped elect in some capacity." And so
you can take your keys out of your pocket, walk through a metal detector, and walk right in there,
yeah,
man. It's open.
Take your card in there, give it to the sergeant of arms, tell him that you want to talk to your legislator. He tells him that you're a constituent. That legislator gets a chance. He can walk out, or he'll give a card back to the sergeant of arms. There's a communication process there because this is the way that government and democracy in the republic is formulated. But if you don't engage in it, somebody else is engaging in it for you, and chances are it's not for your best benefit and your interest. What we do for CRWM is try to build this umbrella relationship, and we built this conduit that's been available to most people over the course of the last 7 years. Our victories have shown that we're in it for the long haul, specifically 127. But how we got to 127 was 5.5 or 6 years of hard work before that. Now, this is not for all the glory. If anybody else wants to share some of the glory, they're more than welcome to help fund it or to show up. We don't have to act on their behalf. And if they don't have enough time and legitimately don't have enough time, then I'm sure that they've got volunteers and members and family people that are just as concerned that somebody can turn around and show up and give some of their time. We're hoping that as we build this messaging platform, that it's informational and it's entertainment, and that we have some valuable information that can be actually distributed that maybe people didn't know about before. And while we don't want to continue to harp about 127 from now until eternity, what we accomplished as a community, 127 was the most formidable victory that you could possibly get over the course of wildlife management in the United States, or at least over the last 20 years. Predators are a hot topic and a hot button. Anytime you mention predators, somebody thinks you're automatically going to lose. We proved that wrong. The way this state has turned, maybe for the better to some and for the worse to others, it's not been for the better on wildlife and wildlife management. And that's what we're hoping to be able to keep people apprised on, keep them motivated on, keep them engaged on, and let them know that we're here to support, not just in Colorado, but in other contiguous states, the western states, and how that might translate into the rest of the country. Because this is a fight. It's the North American model of wildlife conservation. It's not Colorado's model of wildlife conservation. It's not Ohio's model of wildlife conservation. It's the North American model. We should be able to prop that up. I've said this many times before. Prop it up, hold it on a flag, say this is it, and I want you to try to come and get it because we're not going to let you take it. And I think those are things that we are able to do at this point, and based upon the following, based upon the generosity like Meat Eater guys and the Bobby Marshalls of the world, the Howl for Wildlife, and you look at the legislative side of things and what we've done at every single level. It's not by happenstance that this happened. You said something before we started recording. Wildlife does not happen by accident. Shane Mahoney said that when we were at the Capitol back in 2022. Wildlife does not happen by accident, nor does fighting for wildlife. We don't manage it, but we damn sure fight for it, and we fight for the ability to be able to turn around and pursue it in a humane, ethical, formidable fashion to where the funding goes into the model itself and it perpetuates wildlife management and sustainable abilities for the long term, for your kids, for Bobby's kids' kids, because I believe that we can do it, and we can do it in a manner to where we started the movement, we're continuing the movement, and we're going to help finish the movement. And if we don't do it in the manner that we're trying to do it now, I'm fearful that somebody's going to drop the ball, somebody's going to let things go by the wayside. People are going to decide that they don't have the time, they don't have the interest, it's not worth the effort. And I think what we did in November of 2024 proves it takes time, it takes effort, and the reward is a victory that you can turn around and prop up with that flag. And I'm hoping that we can continue to message through this whole process with your help, with the board members' help, with all the other organizations' help, with the industry, with the landowners, with the legislators, the influencers. And I want the antis to turn around and look me in the face when they see this and they see anything else, that I'm here and I'm not going away, and Sean's here and he's not going away, and Bobby's here and he's not going away. And if you want to come take it because it's not for the taking.
Well, if I can add a personal note on that, when I got my elk in September, I came off that mountain and I kind of teared up because we were in the middle of this fight. I'm dead tired because of it. But I teared up thinking about my kid, and I was like, I wonder if by the time he's able to do this, if we're going to be able to do this.
Yep.
And that was archery hunting elk.
Mm-hmm.
That's the mentality you got to have because I don't want that to happen. So I'm tired, I'm tapped. I'm going to keep doing it because I want to have that experience.
My son had a similar experience here just a couple weeks ago, and he harvested a late season cow, and he did it by himself, and he was into about 1,200 head of elk. It was on a ranch where the elk migrate through, 5-month season. First time he's ever done it by himself because we've always hunted together. Mm-hmm. And he told me, he says, it was almost just surreal when he did it and he walked up to it. And he appreciated everything that I was doing and everything that our industry and our community was doing, and that he knew that even though it wasn't a mountain lion laying there, that what we did, we helped to where he could continue to do that, and he felt very privileged to be part of it from behind the scenes and to help support our efforts. And I've heard that more and more from so many different people. Guys that are texting me and sending me pictures of some of their sons' harvest, not theirs, not grip and grins where they put it on Facebook or Instagram, showing the true compassion and the passion of what they have for what we did, and they're willing to support us from here until eternity. And I hope that when people listen to this podcast, that they're willing to listen to some short ones and some medium ones and some long ones, and continue to support us and help us continue to build the bridge and create the movement and move the needle, because the antis are going to continually come, and we just have to figure out a way to make sure that we build that bridge for ourselves, and then we stand up and we defend it and not let it get defeated.
So give us a quick rundown. What this is kind of a different episode to kind of kick things off, but what are listeners gonna hear on Through the Gates? What are you gonna kind of expect week to week on the message?
Well, on the Through the Gates podcast, we're going to try to do some short informational update type things a couple times a week, and maybe that'll be how to get engaged, or what you should know, or maybe what's going to happen, and then we'll try to do some middle type lengthy ones where there'll be updates, but maybe more information, some interviews, biologists, administrators, legislators, guides and outfitters, hunters themselves, influencers, people that just do what we do in the entire community. We'll be doing some shows, and I'm hoping to be able to turn around and bring on board some of the people that supported us through the campaign, some of the really big names that supported us that people said, you can never get them. And we didn't even ask. They just came to us. And so those are the type of things that we're hoping to be able to build off of, but also to listen to about the careers and about the lifestyles and the families that are engaged in these sort of activities and how it affects them. And, maybe it's a product, but the majority of it's going to be, I envisioned getting somebody on here that started a company because they wanted to be in the hunting industry. I envision getting people on here that wanted to be a game warden. I envision getting people on here that wanted to be a biologist, or then maybe became some organized activist for an association that really does conservation work. We're going to get the contacts we built over the last 6 or 7 years have been exponential, but the relationships that we created over the last 14 months have been nothing less than remarkable. And I'm hoping to be able to get a lot of those people on board because they have fantastic stories, and it's relevant. And it's relevant for the cause of supporting the North American model and science-based wildlife management. And I think once people understand that you always just don't have to talk about what bullet you shoot or what gun you have or what broadhead you have. Hey, there's an audience for that. But none of that matters if any of this stuff is taken away, and if all this stuff is taken away by legislators and commissioners and voters. What are you going to talk about then? And that's what we're hoping to be able to turn around and do, is convey that message and lay that out to where people find it interesting and they find it consistent, and they also maybe can turn around and learn something from it to prepare for when they have the time to do what's necessary to save the hunt.
And I'm glad you brought up audience. Who's it for?
It's for sportsmen and women. It's for non-hunters. It's for anybody that's concerned about the way wildlife is managed, and so they can sustain it, whether they like to watch it, whether their uncle likes to hunt it, whether they want to maybe hunt it themselves, whether they just want to know that it's there and that it's appropriately managed and taken care of, and that we're going to continually support game agencies, parks and wildlife agencies out of multiple states that support that methodology and that ideology to make sure that we have what we have in perpetuity. And so it doesn't matter whether they hunt, whether they don't hunt. We just want them to know that what we'll have to be able to display is something that they should be able to find of interest if they really care about wildlife and wildlife resources.
Well, Dan, I am excited to be a part of it. I've been trying to tell the story of North American model for a long time. I've obviously gotten the opportunity to do that with you and reach that broader audience for a story that needs to be told, needs to be celebrated. I think people are hungry for it. I'm excited what we can do here for Through the Gates.
Well, I appreciate all your help and support, and Peakter Creek Films and what you were able to accomplish and what you're willing to sacrifice, you and your new family. And we look forward to continuing to spread the message. Look forward to seeing people out in person at different shows and different events and functions. And they're going to get tired of hearing us at some point in time, but I bet they don't get tired of hearing about the message. And so we look forward to continuing that. We got to thank Bobby Marshall with the Mountainside Podcast. Appreciate the opportunity, the generosity that you've exhibited and displayed. And we look forward to seeing what we can do down the road. And as I always say, aim small, miss small. But the biggest deal in this deal is stay the course and make sure that we try to save the hunt.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Through the Gates. For more content like this, make sure that you like, follow, and subscribe on all of our channels.